Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. We are thrilled to have distinguished artist Jane Hammond as tonight's guest speaker. Originally from Bridgeport, Connecticut, Jane was educated at Mount Holyoke College and the University of Wisconsin. She moved to New York City in 1980. 9 years later, she had her first solo exhibition at Exit Art. And if you ask her nicely, she might tell you the story. It's a great story. She is currently based here, and her work is represented by Galerie Le Long. To date, Jane has had 19 solo exhibitions in New York, as well as numerous others nationally and internationally. Her work is included in over 70 public collections, including the Museum of Modern Art, Whitney Museum of American Art, Metropolitan Museum of Art, MFA Boston, National Gallery of Art, Washington, D.C., Art Institute of Chicago, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Getty Museum, Los Angeles, and Yale University Gallery. Her prolific career in the arts has also led to the creation of a singular vision in photography, and we are going to hear all about that tonight. So please help me welcome Jane Hammond to our lecture series.
Thank you, Jaime. That was lovely. So I try to give a completely different talk every time I do it. And I thought what I would do tonight is open with this particular photograph and really drill down on what I was thinking about when I made it and some of its particulars. They're all titled, and the title here is The 55 Club. As background to this photograph, and you'll often hear me slip and call photographs paintings and call paintings photographs because they're all kind of merged together in my mind. I would point to a few things. One is, probably everyone in the room has read it, Lord of the Flies, where a group of children, sans adults, goes out and kind of creates governance or lack of governance in the world, invents their own rules. Another thing is, a couple of years ago, I read David McCullough's biography of the Wright brothers, which is all about how they figured out how to make flying happen, and it's a fascinating book. Then on a more biographical level, when I was a child, my dad had a plane. My dad had a tiny little silver plane, and he worked very far away, and he was always leaving, and the plane would go up in the air, and it would become a littler and littler and littler plane, and then it would become just a glint of light, and then the light would turn out. So planes for me have always had like a very personal association. I think they've also been associated with longing. I've also been in a plane crash. It wasn't a terrible plane crash, but it was an experience to have the stewardess tell you that we were going to crash, to get you down on the floor, to have your head between your legs. And I always remember that I was eating peppermint lifesavers, so when I got in the crash position, that mint went up my nose. Do you know what I'm talking about? And that's what I always think of when someone says the phrase plane crash. And I also had a broken arm when I was a little girl because the babysitter dropped me down the stairs. And it was kind of a big story in the family because she didn't admit to it, so it was quite a while before I got my arm set. I am this character here. And at a certain point, let's see, in the beginning, I was saving photographs of bandaged children. I am a collector of vernacular photography. In fact, all my work comes out of collecting things and images. I now own 15 or 20,000 snapshots, other people's pictures. Very few of them taken by me. I would say, no more than 100. And so I'm buying photographs of bandaged children. I don't really have a clear idea of where I'm going with that. I'm also buying photographs of crashed cars and crashed airplanes. There's more of those than you might think, because if you think about it, when there's an accident, they take a picture for insurance purposes. And I guess maybe people take their bandaged kids because it's like an event or an episode, or I don't know why. And then when I found this little boy in the front, the whole thing kind of came together for me, because I thought when I found him, okay, it's going to be a kind of band of kids, and he's going to be in the front. And I think I thought of him in the front because of the way he's holding his toes, not really because of his bandagedness, but because of something very particular about him. And then after a while, I decided to make myself kind of the centerpiece of the group, or some kind of captain or something. So I'm assembling all these things. And you know, sometimes I think when you work in a collage way, people think you take, you know, let me just drill down on how I made this figure. This is a photograph my mother took of me when I was 6. This is another kid's body. This is a butterfly net I bought on the internet. This is a dowel in my studio. This is my nephew's arm holding another dowel, and then we've collaged his arm onto this body. Now, when I had myself in there, I looked at it at a certain point. I thought, I need a butterfly net. I didn't really think that it was about coming up with an X so that there'd be like a compositional thing with the airplane, but I think that was part of it. I also felt like everything was so solid and so static. I wanted something that was like a little flag wavy kind of thing, but I didn't want a flag. After I got that in there, I thought to myself, wow, it's not anything. It's a butterfly net. It implies butterflies. So then I was thinking, wow, I have this really stopped, grounded, stuck plane, but I have this kind of whiff of aeriality here. And so that's what made me put the swallows in. And then later on, I got this feather, and I posed my studio assistant holding the feather and collaged it onto this kid. So there would be these like kind of intimations of a flying life amid this very kind of grounded life. I also felt like for a long time that I was sort of, like I have these folders, I have maybe 150, where the photograph is kind of coming together and things that I think belong together are housed inside each folder. It's kind of like I'm a trapper. I've got all these traps out, you know, like I got 100 traps out, but I need another weasel, you know, and then the weasel has to step into the trap. So it was like when I found this boy, and then I found this landscape, and the landscape, the sticks in the landscape made me feel like, wow, when the plane crashes, it's going to make all this unpleasant noise, you know? And that was just something that really kind of appealed to me. And I also gave this girl one of those sticks, you know, picked up from over here, so she could kind of manage this dog she's with. Let's see, these guys become the guards. This guy's really a wreck. And I took this doll and photographed, I own this doll, I took it apart and photographed it in a way, in a compositional way to relate back to that kid, and then put that in there. What else can I tell you about the photo? I wanted to call it the 55 Club, so I changed the number so it would be that, because I think that sounds nice. It sounds better than the 8 Club or the 7 Club or whatever. And I built the plane out of several planes. This is Harrison Ford's wings from his crash. I remembered he had a crash in Westchester, and another engine and a different propeller. And I also take a lot of stuff out. Like there's a lot of stuff missing off this plane now, so it sort of looks more like airplane. It has more of a kind of platonic airplane feel than the actual airplane really did. One of the things that we think about a photograph is that all these people were in a coexistent space. And all of them were in this coexistent space at a given moment in time. And I've done a number of paintings where you very much feel that there are all these objects in a shared space. I did a collaboration for 8 years with the poet John Ashbery, in which I commissioned John to write titles, and I made the paintings for his titles. And this title is called The Soapstone Factory. And I actually made 5 of these paintings. But one of the things that I've come to think about the differences between painting and photography is you understand that everything's in the same space here, but I think the painting has a weaker sense of time. I think somehow in a photograph, you really feel time of day, light, you feel much more the specificity, the granularity of the time. This is another version with the same title. Obviously, I think you can just see the similarities between the photo and these two paintings. Now, in this collaboration I did with John Ashbury, which went from like 1993 to 2002 or something like that, he made 44 titles for me. And one of the titles that in the end I liked, but in the beginning I didn't like at all, was called Irregular Plural. And I finally came up with the idea of a book-shaped painting. And everything on the, and it exists, it creates pairs. So everything on the right-hand page has a paired version on the left-hand page. Like there's two sailors' whimsies, and there's two dogs, and there's two found signs, and two birdhouses, or whatever. And in the end, I made 5 of these paintings. And I made some other paintings that have a kind of non-hierarchical format that's like a list or a scrapbook, things together, and you know intuitively when you look at it, there's not a narrative or causal link between the things. And that title of John's, which led to those kind of scrapbooky paintings, led to me making some paper scrapbooks. And in this paper scrapbook right here, I put a found family picture of my grandmother, my mother, and me with grandmother, mother, and daughter dogs. And really, I own very, very few pictures in those days. I almost never had a camera. I never took pictures, whatever. And you can see I have like all manner of things. Like I'm riffing on language here. I have the golden hour, the golden door, the golden calf, the golden mean, whatever. So I make a bunch of these scrapbooks. And at one point, I think, I'd like to have some more photographs to deal with in these scrapbooks. Mind you, I never once said to myself, I want to make photography. I just kind of don't think like that. I have my head down and I'm just like, things lead to other things. So I go on, I'm a person that works with found objects, and finding things has really changed in my lifetime. They still have all the old, the library, the flea market, the junkyard, but now we have Google and these very targeted ways, not only of finding, but of searching. So we go on eBay in 2003, maybe 2004, and we search for found photographs in 22 categories: ventriloquists, chickens, frogs, I can't remember all the things. Well, bears was one of them. And I buy this photograph. I'm sorry, it's a little hard to see, but this is the first photograph I bought on the internet. I bought it from a dealer in New Zealand. It's a German photograph from the 30s. I was searching for bear. It's a man in a bear costume with a woman. And I got it, and it came in the mail, and it was really kind of intriguing to me that you could put the word bear out and this thing could come to you. So in the next 6 weeks, I bought 900 photographs on eBay, having no real clear idea what I was going to do with them. And when you have 900 things and you work from found things, as I do, if you can't find the stuff you have, it's not really that good. So you have to figure out some system where you can categorize things enough that you can find them later. And yet, one of the things that I'm really intrigued with is the elasticity of the nature of the things and their uncategorizability. So I'm constantly shifting the categories. So I have all these photographs laid out on a table, all 900 of them, in these various categories, things coming in from the left, people lying down, men, women, like I'm changing my mind all the time. And then I go in and I'm cooking dinner, and I remember a photograph. And then I go back in the studio to find the photograph that is in my head, only to discover that I have braided together elements from 5 different photographs. This man with this woman, and like this way you might misremember something from a car accident you saw or whatever. And I thought to myself, I want to do this. I want to do something that walks through the portal of the veracity and the verisimilitude that you associate with small black and white photography, but actually comes out of my head. I didn't really know how to do it, but I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to make like a still from a movie in my head. And so I wildly set about trying to solve a lot of technical problems. And I have formulated a way of working where I have an idea, sometimes right out of my head, sometimes in a dream, sometimes inspired by things I find in the world. And I make a paper collage with Xerox from the photographs and scissors. I make the paper collage to help me refine the idea, and because I also work with a person who's very good at Photoshop, and I can't explain my idea to her if I don't have something to show her. So in the beginning we meet and I show her the paper collage and I explain what's going on in the idea. I remember saying to her, in my mind, this is sort of like a Fisher-Price toy. Like I see how the snail could go into the truck. And I also am liking the way the scripty, cursive kind of quality of the guardrail kind of marries with the writing on the truck. And I also love the neck of the snail. And then, of course, they both have an element of accident about them. And they both have a different sense of speed about them. And it's important to me that we have this Ford Fairlane over here because it's actually going at a third speed. So we have like stopped, slow, and faster. And then we work together for a while and we kind of build the photograph. And sometimes they take 3 months. I'm working on one right now, which is a yard sale. And the fictional man in my mind who's selling these things is selling like 65 things. Totem poles, cement dinosaurs, panda bears, and it's like grueling to put it together. They all have titles. And I somehow thought this picture was Maine. Now, sometimes when you find a vernacular photograph, it'll say something on the back of it. So I might have found that it was Maine, or I might have made up that it was Maine. So I called the picture Mechanic Falls because I looked at a map of Maine and got that language from Maine, and it seemed good. And I was thinking, like, I don't know what, like of some kind of like gizmo here, and I was like thinking about there's like a visual thing in my mind between the clothespin and the claws and the little straws, and there's something about her face that's very appealing to me. I mean, it's hard to say sometimes why I put these things together. Now, but I can say this, I never put something together like to be cool or to be outlandish, or it has to have some, it's true to me. It has to mean something to me. It has to be specific and real. Like, if I'd never read the Carlos Castaneda books, I would have never made this photograph, which is called Cabrito, because somehow I feel like this character comes out of, years ago reading those books. And then there's things you really search for, like we really worked hard so that like this guy, you can actually see a glint in his eye. And this is called Panchatantra, which is a cycle of tales in India. That's a kind of cosmology where people and animals have sex together and create the world. So one of the things I remember about making this picture is, and one of the things that's really thrilling to me, even though I start with what I think is a fixed idea, like the collage, the thing moves all over on me, and oftentimes I don't end up with the same photograph I thought I was going to start with. And we'll try different things. And like, I remember taking this elephant, and this is so easy to do in Photoshop, to make him bigger, to make him smaller, to move him back, and his tusks are out of the water. And then I was like, let's move him forward and dip his tusks into the water. And like, when we did that, it was like so sexual and so cool. And it's just like, you can make her bosoms, you can make her have more of a tan. And when you make her have more of a tan, then she feels more naked. Like you can make these kind of semiotic shifts that are really small. They're like beyond language, and we're also hardwired to read human faces, that you can you just put a little more light on the face and the person reads differently to you emotionally. I'm really into knots, and I have like 10 books on knot tying, and I love their names. So this photograph is named after a knot, and the knot is called the regular Matthew Walker. And I found this photograph, and a lot of times what happens to me is like, you're at a flea market, you're not Googling. When you're Googling, you have a high possibility of getting what you're looking for. When you're at a flea market, you have no idea what the next thing is you're going to pull up. And a lot of times I'll pull something up and immediately I'll think of this other picture I have, or immediately I'll think of what I want to do with it. It's not that I always do that, but I do it a high percentage of the time. It's kind of like first thought, best thought. So I pulled this photograph up and I looked at it and I thought, okay, this is a knot lesson. And then I kind of saw this image. Now, I didn't have a photograph of a naked man tied up like that, but that's what I wanted. And I searched for a while on like bondage sites and stuff, but I didn't even get close. So I went to an art school. I think I went to SVA. No, I went to Parsons. And I found the person in charge of the models. And I said that I was looking for a male model, and I wanted to have him to have a body like he could be 1950, like not some big, muscular, you know what I mean? Like not a guy that's been weightlifting for 10 years. And I got this guy, and he was straight from Budapest. And he was here to go to Union Theological Seminary. So I'm like, uh-oh. Like when I find that, I already have him over at the house. So when he tells me he's studying to be a priest, so I'm like, wow, we got to talk, you know. So I explained to him, you know, what we were going to do. And I didn't take this picture. I had a professional. I went to James Dee's studio. This is before I'm taking pictures. And I had the black box. That's a tool in my studio. And I had all the rope. Oh, first he came over and he had the wrong haircut to be with those guys. So I said to him, I'll give you $25 if you go to Canal Street with this picture and get a haircut that's kind of like this. So he was fine. Okay. So then we had another photo session, and like I explained what I wanted him to do, and he was just like completely fine. He did it like no problem. And then he was like, can I have a digital copy for my girlfriend? And I was like, no problem. And like, I mean, you won't almost believe me, but it was like very easy. And one of the things I think that's interesting is like, sometimes even I forget. Like, I made this whole still life up here, and I got this picture of a sailor from another source. But I actually can't remember tonight if I put these sailor hats in or if these sailor hats were in the original photograph. One of the things I really like about photography is that if I make an oil painting and there's a window or a curtain, you look at it and you think, this is how Jane Hammond paints a curtain. It becomes about me. But if I have a photograph and there's a piece of cardboard tacked into a window, or there's a curtain, you look at it and you think, my sister had those curtains in her bedroom. There is this shared cultural granularity where everyone who looks at this knows what it's like when you thumbtack in there. And I just really love that about photography, that you understand this whole world of things, and it kind of traffics in the thinginess of the things. You know, it's like, I called this So Much Depends because I'm quoting that William Carlos Williams poem, which is, so much depends on a red wheelbarrow glazed with rain beside the white chickens. And it's really a celebration of the transcendental nature of ordinary things, of ordinary perceptual experience. This one, not so much. This is called Can You Draw This? I've never thought about it till tonight, but I'm from Westport, Connecticut, which is where the famous artist school was. And they used to have these matchbooks. And it would say, can you draw this? And it would have like a cowboy. Then you would draw the cowboy and send it in. Then they would say, oh my God, Cheryl, you're so qualified, you'll be able to take our class. So that's kind of something that's in my background, you know. So I found an art school scene, of course, like almost everyone is a man. Well, not almost everyone, but many people are men. And they have sort of an oddly formal way of being. And then I cooked up these models, and then of course I made the drawings. and photographed them at the angles that their easels are at, and made this other one on the floor here. Now, I also kind of rebuild the room. Kathy and I do together. I'll talk about this more later, because a lot of times these found snapshots, they're not very good, you know? And like, you look at the room, it's not beautiful. It's not striking. It doesn't have good proportions. So sometimes we're working to make the things seem real and plausible, but sometimes we're also just working to make the things seem better, to have like better bones. I don't really know how else to say it. I like the idea of making a still life photograph because I really love still life painting, but I've only made one or two, and I find it very hard because when there isn't something alive in there, it makes it difficult for me. I don't really fully understand it, but I've spent a bunch of time in Hawaii, and in Hawaii sometimes you'll go to a cemetery and they'll have these Buddhist altarpieces. And they really fascinate me in terms of their concept of authorship and composition. One person comes at a time and they set down a shell or a flower or a fruit. So when the ninth person comes, they're arranging their thing in relationship to the 8 other things that came before them, but they're not rearranging the whole. So you get this thing at the end and you kind of think, who is the author of this? You know, what kind of thing is this? So this is something that I was using as a guide for myself, these altarpieces that I saw on the Big Island. This is also a trophy for photography, and there is a little photograph there too. And I notice as I begin to work in silver gelatin, it really loves, it's a medium that really loves metal, and it really loves water, and it really loves glass. And I was really kind of feeling that when I made this picture. Now, all the photographs that I've shown you so far are silver gelatin prints, and I can explain later how you make a silver gelatin print of something that never happened. But meanwhile, I'm kind of falling in love with snapshots in and of themselves a little bit, even though initially I thought of them as a tool. So I made these pieces. This is kind of a sort of an off branch of my photographic practice, which consist of like 110 snapshots, and they're all found snapshots from other people's lives. And then I took 30 pictures of myself from babyhood to fat middle age. And then in Photoshop, I made myself inhabit all these other people's lives. So I'm like a drunk woman with 2 shotguns. I'm a Japanese princess reluctantly getting married. I'm a little girl holding a dead duck. I'm a professional photographer. I'm an aspiring young guitarist. I'm a spear fisherman. I'm a pilot. I'm an S&M practitioner. You know, I'm a nurse, blah, blah, blah. And each one of these is made into a snapshot. I have to explain to people they're not actually found snapshots. They're things I made. And I cut the edges of them with manicure scissors, and I made the little corners, whatever. And then they're all window matted, and some of them are like this photograph is torn in half and scotch taped back together. You know, some of them are like rough, the way found snapshots actually are. There, you can see maybe a little better. You can give yourself, oh, here's the woman who's drunk and she has 2 shotguns. And then here I have this incredibly hot body. And then here I'm in the army and I'm riding this turtle. And then this piece is called Album Rosalind Braverman, because this is the Braverman's Christmas card. I like the way she had this gun. And it's really good because my weight has really fluctuated in the last 20 years. So it's really good because I have like thin pictures, fat pictures. I have like all kinds of pictures. You see how you recognize them? And then this is a smaller piece called Judy Jones, album Judy Jones, and everything has to do with photography. So the thought I have whenever I see this picture is I make the prints with Chuck Kelton, who's like a killer printer and a beautiful human being. And when Chuck develops the prints, he has never seen my paper collage. He has never heard a word from me. At first I thought this was a crazy idea because I'm like so explainy, you know, like I wanted to go in and tell him like 45 brilliant things about this photograph. But something told me to just shut up. So like he has the photograph and the photograph comes up and like he responds to it. And he makes like 9 proofs, and then I go in and I look at the proofs with him and we talk. And I remember he said to me, let's lighten it up back here so the priest has somewhere to go away to, you know? And it's like, this is one of the things I love about photography, at least the way I'm doing it. It's a very collaborative thing. I have a negative maker, I have a printer, and I have Kathy, who I do the photoshopping with. And each person is probably, you know, responsible. Like Kathy and I said to her, like, I want this to be like a frescoed wall that's like falling apart. And we got all these religious paintings, and then we put them in, and then we started erasing them in all kinds of ways. And then we built masks that had a brick pattern and erased through that. And it's like, you let yourself be influenced by sometimes the other people. Like occasionally Kathy will say like, well, is there wind? You know, and like, I'm like, wow, the wind, blah, blah, blah. So I really enjoy very much the collaborative nature of it. When I was little, I lived with my grandparents, and so did my aunt when she was home, but most of the time she was in Egypt on a dig. So I knew this word when I was really little, this word dig, and I didn't know exactly what it was, but it was always something that I thought was very interesting. And I knew that people on a dig were always finding things down in the ground. So it made me very interested in digging in the ground. So when I saw this photograph of this, it's actually a photo postcard of a building in Damascus, Syria, I remembered this whale skeleton I had in this guy's backyard. And then the idea in my mind was to just kind of make it into this archaeological thing. I mean, I think the relationship between the building and the whale is kind of beautiful and maybe obvious in the same way. But I was also thinking after a while about the whole idea of photography's relationship to memory and the idea of digging. So it's like almost kind of a pun for me. And then I also sometimes have a person like this in a photograph, the person who knows there's a picture being taken, who has that look like they're looking at the photographer right now. And that's kind of interesting to me because it's like, who exactly is the photographer in this picture? You know, it's like I sometimes joke that I'm collaborating with like 35 other photographers. They just don't know they're collaborating with me. I had a collection of pedal cars. I kept buying kids in pedal cars. And then I finally found, I think what put me over the edge with the pedal car was, I thought this gas station was really beautiful. So I merged 2 gas stations, both of which are in Hong Kong. What are the chances you're going to find 2 Hong Kong gas stations? And I had all these kids and all these banged up cars, like I said, from the insurance thing. I mean, these were not the cars there. These were not the windows broken. These were not the flags there. This was not the pavement. This is all Soho. You know, this is when it occurs to me that instead of killing myself finding photographs with pavement at the right angle, I'm surrounded by pavement. I could just go out and start taking pictures of pavement. And there's all kinds of pavement in my neighborhood that's like half Belgian block, half asphalt on top of it, whatever. So we very painstakingly build this photograph, which is called Rally. Now, when I was a child, I also lived with these people for a year, and they collected old cars, and we went to all these rallies. Now, is that there? I think it's like a dream. It's like a big braid of your childhood, your waking life, your intellectual ideas, things you learn about culture. I like this. I've done a lot more of this lately, where there's like, it's almost like the third estate. It's not the photographer, it's not the people in the picture. It's like another photographer is taking a picture somewhere else, or someone else has just spotted you, or whatever. This idea of gathering many similar ideas, gathering very many similar images, this is something that that comes easily to me and that I find interesting. Like, this is a little piece of, consists of like 80 matchbooks, all of which I made. And then the matchbooks each have a hand. Like, this is a frog, you know, and they have a little relationship sometimes. And then there's a material in here, and they make sense as individuals, and then you can like reorganize them. But it's also kind of like, what is handedness? How many different ways can you make a hand? How far can you stretch it before someone doesn't know it's a hand? And like, what happens when these hands come together? Or like, this is a piece which is, the idea is like you're in a Mendy parlor, you know, the henna painting, and like this is like tattoo flash, you know, you can say which one you want. So it's a bulletin board of all these different ways of painting a hand. So here's an example of like how I get ideas, and it's very far out there, I know. I'm at a flea market and I find an 8x10 photograph by an army photographer, and it consists of this tree-like apparatus, and it's two guys and they're building camo netting. So they have like rope all over it and then they're tying rags onto it. I have no idea, but like 20 years ago, I saw this movie about Calvin and Ruby Black called Possum Trot. They were outsider artists who lived in Redlands, California, or somewhere in the back low part of California. And they made these whirligigs that were like carousels, and they had dolls on them. And when I saw that army photograph, I thought, I'm going to take the men out, all the camo off, hang doll heads on this tree with wire, and then it's going to be in a California place like Blythe, and it's going to have this woman who I remembered is in my collection because she's making this gesture. Can you see it? Like she's thinking about the dolls, or she's talking about the doll, like her hands are with the dolls' heads. So I don't know how I made that connection. I hadn't thought of Possum Trot in 20 years, but I trust those connections. So then I got all these dolls on the internet and from this man at the flea market, and I cut a lot of their heads off, and then I made these wire hangers, and then I photographed the hangers at all different angles, and then in Photoshop, Kathy and I put the dolls on the hangers and hung the dolls' heads on the tree. And then we took 2 sheds and built this house out of parts of the sheds. I have a collection of hubcaps, so we arranged these hubcaps. I mean, I remember Kathy's husband called me and said, Jane, do you know those are truck tires? And I was like, you know, I think it's okay. So the title is Blythe, and it's a little bit of a pun because Blythe is a woman's name, and it's also a place in this part of California that I was referencing. I've made a few simple photographs where I've just married together 2 things. Like, I found the woman with the fox, and I thought, I'm going to put her in that Algerian doorway with the parakeet. But it hardly ever works for me. And even here, I had all kinds of cords and other flowers, and finally I just kind of came back. But what I really liked about her is I think she has like a foxy face. Like, I think she and her fox have a nice kind of sisterhood. Obviously, there's the fox and parakeet thing, and then her suit is kind of weirdly rumpled. Sometimes I find these strange things at the end. Like, I found this photograph of this barn, and neither of these people were there, but the idea came into my mind to put these 2 people together in that place. I can't exactly tell you why. And it's some kind of story about like the father's coming back. The father has returned. It's called The Return. And I have a lot of tattooed men, but I really wanted this one with the Jesus, and maybe it has something to do with the pole. But at the very end, I mean, we worked hard on how far apart they should be, and whether we did 3 versions of whether there should be this little hint of a driveway there or not. I mean, and we had more driveway here, and we changed it because it really changed the nature of the intimacy of their confrontation. But anyhow, the amazing thing for me was when I was completely finished, I was putting away this mother shot, and I turned the photograph over, and it was La Crosse, Wisconsin. And I think it's possible that I saw that at some point, and that's what made me think of the tattoo of the crucifixion. I'm not really even sure. So I had the idea after finding several photographs of the same little boy in Germany that I would make him into a set of identical twins. And then along the way, I thought it would be interesting if one of the twins was the photographer. So I got one of those old-time squeeze ball things. I understand you have to really look at this thing before you see that. I also made their seahorse necklaces. But anyhow, so the thing I like best about this is it's called Self-Portrait with Twin, singular, because the title is kind of a construction of this. It's how this boy would think of it. This one boy would think of the twinness. I found a photograph in Germany. Like, I found so many photographs that I ended up liking that were German, that one day I thought to myself, why don't we just go to Germany and look there? And I think it's not the subject matter. I think it's that their lenses a long time ago were really good. I mean, they've had good lenses for a long time, so the grass looks great, you know? So this was a photograph with no people in it, and it had a brand new, shiny black Volkswagen. I think it's like a kind of my first car photograph. And when I saw it, I thought, I'm going to take the car out, and I'm going to do a park. And it was partially out of my fascination with those Buddhist altarpieces, and partially because I had recently been to Central Park on a Sunday, and I had sort of looked at the park through the lens of the Buddhist altarpieces, of how, like, this person comes, and then this person situates themselves, and then this person's over here, not too close, but not so far away someone else is going to come in the middle, you know, and like the teenagers are making out, the old Chinese people are hunting for ginkgo nuts. There's a group of people, each one has a Doberman pincer over here, you know, and it's kind of fascinating, like, to see the park as like a big still life. So I built this park picture, and you'll notice over here I have these guys that are having that moment where they recognize, you know, their picture is being taken. And I took my assistant up here, and we put all this string around. It's a found picture of two people untying a knot. But one of them was not this person, and I have given them much more string. And in a way, I think this idea was the kind of genesis of how the whole bird thing spun out, and then the bubble gum came from the birds. I'm not exactly sure. Then when I finished, I thought, well, this idea is only interesting if you do it again on another day. So this photograph, that photograph is called Park. This photograph is called 9 Days Later. It's the same park with longer grass and all new people. And how did I do that? I went up to NYU and I stopped this man and I said, when are you going to cut the grass? So of course he thinks I live there and I'm complaining that the grass is too long. So I'm like, no, I want the long moment, you know? So I go up there and photograph the long grass and then, you know, build all these other things. And you can see there's this guy back here who's kind of skinny dipping. I guess I was going to make the point here that these park pictures do harken back, I think, to the soapstone paintings. At least in my mind, they do. You might remember in the regular plural paintings that there's like this concept of pairs, like there's things that have counterparts with other things. Like I'm like kind of got this mix and match obsession in my mind, I guess. So this is a photograph called the Pears game. It's a kind of game that people would play. I probably have 60 books on games. I mean, I'm really interested in them. They're in all cultures. They kind of teach people the relationship between strategy and risk. So anyhow, this is a photograph that I never know whether I should like explain to people how you put the pairs together to get a pair for everyone or let people figure it out, but it's hard to figure it out this fast. But it's a game where there's a guy who's it's this guy who's covering his eyes, and he gets to ask yes or no questions, and then he has to figure out without looking who belongs with who. This is a painting I made like, I don't know, 15 years ago on blackboard paint, and it's called White Things. I thought I was going to make a group of paintings, white things, black things, green things, red things, blue things, and yellow things, but I got distracted and I only made the white one. But interestingly, I made this photo and I titled it White Things. And I had found this photograph in Germany of this edifice in this forest. And right away I thought of like German fairy tales. I mean, it really looks like the Black Forest, and it felt really kind of dark and evil to me. And so I started to kind of build this ensemble of creatures that were around it. I don't really know how to explain it in logical terms. And two key elements were, this is my studio assistant in a sexy ghost costume I made for her. This polar bear's exact gesture seemed like a really important part of it to me. And Craig and I had been in Scotland, and there had been a bar where we did the recycling called the White Hart. I didn't even know that term, but it's a white deer. So we built this ensemble of these things, and then one day when we were about 3/4 of the way through, I looked at this building and I thought, shit, that is a Nazi bunker. And I Googled Nazi bunker, and I got like 13 of them, and they all look like this. Not exactly like this, but enough like this that there's no doubt in my mind that that's what this is. So then I was like, should I use this or should I not use this? But then I thought like, well, you were after evil, you know, you got it. So I'm going to end with this photograph. It's called The Return of the Swans. I can't remember which came first. I have some of these bonfires. I think they're from like fraternities at colleges or something. I'm not really sure, you know. I have a group of photo postcards I bought in Iceland. I was very keen to collect photography in Iceland, but I could only find postcards. And I had this dancing woman, though she didn't have this head or these arms. I had this woman dancing. There's actually a knife like tucked in her waistband as a knife. And I had these crouching children. Craig found them in the $2 bin somewhere. And right away when he showed me the crouching children, I thought of putting them together. And then the whole idea of like Tchaikovsky's Rites of Spring, like the idea of some kind of celebration. So it's called The Return of the Swans. And it's like some kind of celebration of like a kind of vernal moment when these birds come back and these people make this big fire, etc. So I bought this swan mask actually from a woman in Tennessee, kind of a crafter type woman over the internet. And then I posed my assistant, Phoebe, to have her hands more, I don't know, like more birdie. I kept saying to her, make your hands more birdie. And then this is kind of a thing. There's a little trope in vernacular photography where Susie's behind Betty with a second set of arms. Do you know what I'm talking about? So instead of making it look like those are the arms, I was kind of referring to that trope. This is actually like 3 or 4 bonfires put together. I made all these bundles of sticks. Then I started looking for these English guys dressed in straw because I thought, I'm going to have the man who's setting the fire be like wildly flammable. Like, so it looks like he's like really in danger. So I made this torch, and then I found this guy. I had to find one who wasn't posing, one who was turning away. Usually when people have these spectacular costumes, they're like, ah, look at me, how great my costume is, you know. So, and then we found a gas can somewhere, and then we Googled what gas is in Iceland, and then we put the lettering on, you know, so it's like, I don't know, the whole thing was like a scene in my mind. I mean, when I say still from a movie in my head, this is very much kind of what I'm talking about with that one. And you know, when I was a little girl, we had all these tent caterpillars in our woods, in the trees, and my dad and I would make these torches. And then we'd go out with a gas can, and then we'd like burn the caterpillars alive with the torch. So like all these odd things kind of reappear. I guess everyone's work is like that. I don't know.
Thank you for coming out tonight, and I've really enjoyed seeing your work. I'm fascinated by your process. And how do you know when you're done? These are so complex. And
years ago, this collector came to my studio, and he was looking at drawings that were equally complex. And he said to me, "How do you know when you're done?" And here's the answer that popped out of my mouth, but I had never said it before that day. And it's funny because it relates to fire. So I said, when you build a campfire, the fire is hot and the stones around it are cold. And then an hour later, the fire is hot and the stones are hot. And then 9 hours later, the fire is cool and the stones are still warm. So you're done when you feel like a transfer of energy. So the object is radiating back to you and you're not having to like drag it into being anymore. That's part of the job of being an artist, and you know it when you see it. You know what I mean? In the same way that if I said to you, how do you know when you've fallen in love? How do you know when the other person is lying? How do you know what I mean? Like all these things we know, but it's hard to say how we know them. So it's pretty much like that. One of the things that's funny is because I have a partner when I make these photographs, she's more anal than I am. And sometimes I have to say to her, we're done, you know? And she's like, I want to clean up the gas can some more. I'm like, no, the gas can's fine, you know? So that's a funny part of it that I never got into with the drawings. Sometimes I also have discovered, like right now with the yard sale, I was kind of irritated because it's going so slowly. But then I was away from it for like a week. And then when I came back and looked at my collage, I was like, you know, the whole right side of this thing is not that good. So the fact that she caused me to have the delay is like, the thing is better now, you know?
I wanted to ask you about the Ashbury collaboration.
Yeah.
I was very intrigued by that.
Yeah.
Well, by so many things. By the number of titles that he sent you. Did you complete that exact number of paintings, or did you just do 5 and be done with it? Or there was 44, right?
Yeah, so if you, I mean, I'm going to answer your question, but I just wrote this thing. It's called Best American Poetry. If you go to their website, I like tell the story of the collaboration. And one of the things about the collaboration is I got the idea, first of all, I made paintings with these very complicated numerical titles, so there was no language associated with my paintings heretofore, you know? So, and I made paintings from found information, so found titles like was kind of a turn on to me. So I got this idea to ask John to write titles. Also, it relates perfectly to the nature of John's poetry, but don't let me get started on that. We'll be here all night. So when I called him up, he seemed so disinterested. He was like, Like I never said anything about what to do or how many I didn't say I was looking for 10 or 5 or, you know, whatever. And then he called me back a week later and he had made 44. You know, so in the end I made 64 paintings because some things I made 5 of one or 2 of another or 3 of another or whatever. Towards the end, he said to me, I'll make you more titles. And I just thought, you know, this is a thing. It's a project, and that's what it was those, you know, I didn't want more later kind of thing. I never said anything to him about what to do. It's a good thing I didn't, you know, but it was partially because he seemed so unreceptive when I called him. Nowadays, you do it in an email, and you wouldn't, like, hear all that, you know? But it was really a great thing, and I'm a real devotee of collaboration. I've done a lot of artist books with other people, and I love printmaking for that reason. And it's one of the things I love about the photography. Like, if I'm going out to print with Chuck, I'm like, when I get up that morning, I'm like a kid. I'm like, oh, goody, I get to go there today, you know? And I love talking about it with him, and we'll have these moments where I'm like, you know, my mother was pregnant. And then that like completely changes like how he dodges and burns on the blouse she's wearing because he didn't know she was pregnant, you know? So it's really, you can really tweak the photograph, and you can really feel these other things that are the other people. It's great to work with other people. I really like it. The older I get, the more I like it.
Can you go back to the image of the funeral?
Sure.
That you talked about Chuck making the prints?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you an odd question. I'm not sure why I'm asking it, except that the image itself is old, has an appearance of being old. I mean, in the sense that it could have been taken in the 50s.
Yeah.
And it keeps that feeling in the print that you're in the image that you're showing here. Was Chuck producing prints from a digital negative, or were you printing digitally?
Okay, so here's what I do. I take, let me give you like a simple example, then it actually gets worse, okay? Let's say this consists of 20 photographs. I take those 20 photographs, I send them to this person who has a drum scanner, and they scan the photographs. I have a scanner, but the drum scanner's a little bit better. And like when you're taking a small thing and you're blowing it up to a bigger thing, you need every ounce of resolution you can get. So then I have, like, let's say 20 digital files. Then I make the paper collage so I can explain to Kathy what we're doing, and also it helps me figure out what I'm doing. It's not like it's so crystal clear in my mind. Then she and I work in Photoshop in an exclusively digital way for like 2 or 3 months oftentimes. I don't think we've ever made a photograph faster than a month. And we work together, sitting closely side by side. I leave her with kind of homework that we both write together on a piece of paper. She sends iterations to me digitally. I print them out. Sometimes I say, move this girl more to the right, make her bigger, something like that. We probably meet, I don't know, like we've probably met on the yard sale already 7 times. But she's also working on her own. Finally, when we're done, we discussed that a moment ago, we have a digital file in which she compresses and flattens all these layers together. We can have like 114 layers. I mean, it's like nutty. And then we send that digital file to this guy, Sergio, who, if you're here tonight, please raise your hand. I've still never met Sergio. And Sergio converts the digital file to a negative. It's, I think, called an LVT negative, which stands for light valve transfer. Light valve technology. Thank you. Okay, that goes to Chuck Kelton. Chuck Kelton prints that in a darkroom the same way he prints Danny Lyons or Helen Levitt, or the same chemicals, the same baths, etc. Then I go out to Chuck's and we have like 9 prints. I'm usually choosing between 2. I almost always want the people from this one with the place from this one, but I want this guy a little lighter. It's never like bingo, it's number 3. And then Chuck makes a drawing on the back. I don't even know if all printers do that because I've only ever been to Chuck, and then he proofs from there. I mean, he makes the final version. So it's a silver gelatin print of something that never happened, and it's printed in a darkroom, And one question I sometimes ask myself, in the beginning I thought, it's more interesting conceptually if it's a silver gelatin print. That's how it seems to me than if it's a digital print. Because I think you associate digital prints with imaginary things. And this feels freighted with more verisimilitude to me. Now, people always ask me, what happens if you're still alive when the last photographic paper has put its pair of wings on and left our planet? Will I make digital prints? I probably will. And am I aware that you can make digital prints that look a whole lot like a silver gelatin print? Yes, I am. But I really like this right now, so I'm not.
But do you find that the silver gelatin print, it maintained the integrity from which your originals came from. You're dealing from your originals come from prints,
Yes.
and you're making these collages,
Yes.
and you're going back to the
Yes.
original.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand your question, but like, maintain is a tough word because what happens, like, let's say we had a poem in French and we translated it to English, then we translated it to Spanish, then we translated it back to French. It might be a good poem in all 4 iterations, but it's not the same thing when it goes back over here. So like, these things change. Sometimes they change in ways where I get up there and I go like, oh, I wish you could see her flower better, you know? That can happen. And then sometimes ways in which we change things become kind of remarkable to me. Even like I thought I knew, like I don't completely know what this is going to look like and how believable it is going to be till I get out to Chuck's. I know what it looks like in the digital version. So I'm now working 16 by 20. I've now made like almost 100 pictures, like maybe 93 or so. I don't know the exact number. For a long time, I was working 11 by 14. I don't know where I got this idea, but I somehow thought I couldn't work bigger than that because I didn't have the resolution to do it. And then I got really tired of people not being able to see things that were in the photographs. You know, like I would be explaining, oh, that's a match. He's the one that just lit the candle. And then the other person would go like, well, it's a match. Let me get my reading glasses. Or, you know, and I would be like, you know, half the stuff here, I mean, you have to be like a kind of detective to look at these photographs. But I'm trying to make a photograph that like, if you owned it, you'd be interested in it 2 years from now. Not something that you think is fascinating in an art fair when you're going like this, you know? But I just thought, let me try it bigger. And then bigger was better. It isn't always, but you know, it was.
It's really like fascinating for me to see you're pulling like multiple kind of elements and then combine them together into one image. I guess one question that I have is during the process, like it actually, you mentioned rarely an image took less than 1 month to complete.
Right.
So during the process, do you tend to actually have the image in your mind and then you go out to find the object? Or it's more like you're exploring, you find, oh, this is fascinating, I want to pull this into my image. Like, what's your thought process?
Yeah, it's both. It's like, there's this famous thing Jasper John said when he was asked a similar question. He said, sometimes I see it and then I paint it. Sometimes I paint it and then I see it. You know, so sometimes I get an idea out of my unconscious, the news, a story my sister told me, you know, a holiday I saw in National Geographic, you know, something. Oftentimes it's a combination of 2 of those things. The way you know how when you dream, you're often braiding together 2 things that are kind of going on in your life? But sometimes I find things and I'm like, bingo, this suggests a whole photograph to me. You know, like I'm making a photograph of a dance contest. I have about 10 dancers. 6 of them I'm not that in love with, so it's probably going to be a long time before I start the photograph. But last week I bought this photograph called Balloon Titties, okay? It's like a drunk man in a sport jacket and a suit. He's holding a sport jacket like this. He's wearing suspenders and he has balloons on his bosoms. And I thought, you know what? He's going in my dancing photo, you know? So I didn't see him coming, but like, he's good because he's a single person. I have too many couples. He's like really drunk and kind of crazy. And then a week later, I found like a 14-year-old boy, like really straight looking boy, and he's putting a record on a record player. So I thought, okay. So, I mean, you have like a general idea that makes you paying attention and thinking about something. But then the universe has to give you the rest of the things. I don't think I could hire people and have them dance. I think it would look stupid, you know? So I have to kind of wait for some more good dancers. And I'm always on the hunt. You know, I found this guy, I'm constantly bidding against this one person. And so then I figured out who he was. Then I Googled him. Then he's like a photography curator and professor, and he's written all these books. So I finally summoned up my courage and I wrote him. So like I have like a Skype date with this guy, you know. And I'm hoping maybe I can borrow this little girl from him that he aced me out on.
Before the lecture got started, you and I were talking, and you told the story of how you got your first solo exhibition in New York. Number one of 19 solo exhibitions in New York, and you're in just about every collection that matters. But I thought, you know, that the story itself was maybe interesting for our students to hear.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting story. So I came to New York when I was 29, and I had my first gallery, and I had my first one-person exhibition in New York when I was 39. And for 10 years, I worked a series of odd and part-time jobs. One time I had 5 jobs at once. I had a job where I cashiered all night in a restaurant, and then I taught school the next morning, so I had like 2 hours of sleep between the two, but you have more energy when you're 29. And I was painting, and I was for like 5 or 6 years, I didn't think I was ready to have a gallery. And then when I thought I was ready, I was so old, I wanted to have a really good gallery. So I had these relationships with these dealers. I will say that other artists were very helpful to me, and they brought other dealers over. And one piece of advice I have to young artists is, don't have people over that you really have high hopes for until you're ready, because if you think it's hard to get them over the first time, it's impossible to get them over the second time if you don't totally wow them the first time. So I had these relationships with certain people. I was telling you, Barbara Gladstone came over 3 times, and other people that were like big deal, you know, people. And so my plan was I was going to like wait another 6 months, and you know, and meanwhile I had made friends with a group of artists, and Judy Pfaff came over to my studio once, and she is not that much older than I am, and she's been showing for much longer, you know. And she said to me, "You're going about this all wrong." And she told me this story of how she got in the Whitney Biennial because she was in this little crummy show in this little place, but somebody stumbled, you know. So she said to me, "You have to jump in the river. You have to get your feet wet. You have to just start, and then something else will happen or something." But you're like being too premeditated and too fussy. I'm kind of putting words in her mouth, but that's the gist of what she meant. So it was shortly after that I met Ursula von Riedingsvard, and she had had a show at Exit Art. And she offered to bring Jeanette and Colo, who ran Exit Art, over to my space. I was telling Jaime, Exit Art did not have the profile then that it had 10 years after then. So like I was kind of like, Exit Art, do I want that, you know? So Jeanette and Colo came over. I had 22 finished paintings in my studio. I had paintings all over the walls, and I had this stepladder in the front, and I had 4 paintings leaning on the stepladder. I had cement blocks on the stepladder so it didn't fall over. And then I had 4 paintings, and then the 4th one sticking out. So I had 7, like in a spiral, like a kind of... So it was very obvious I was ready for a show. And they came over, and they stayed like an hour, and I don't even remember them huddling, you know? But then she said, "We want to give you a show." I mean, just like right there in that first visit. So the whole thing was like suddenly over that I'd made such a gigantic production of for like 6 years or whatever. And I was saying to Jaime, the show after me was David Hammond's. And I remember David Hammond's was someone I didn't know. I'd never heard of him. I think he's like one of the best artists alive now. I mean, I admire him tremendously. And I remember looking at a piece of paper, and it said Jane Hammond, David Hammond's, and I thought, oh, they're alphabetizing something. You know, I mean, it was like, it ended up being one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And it ended up that I got like 6 reviews, and I still didn't have a and then I had Jose Freire just came over and said, like, he actually said, I want to show you before the Exit Art show went up, but maybe the Exit Art show, I don't know, but the whole thing kind of fell together. And as I said to you, I always tell students, like, you have to be in the world making things happen. You can't stay home and wish they would happen. But you go out into the world and you knock on doors A through K, and W opens 2 years later. Like, it's not like you get what you want, but because you're wanting and working, you get something. And oftentimes it's even better than what you wanted. But you have to kind of recognize opportunity, and you have to kind of make things happen. At least that's what I think.
Well, on that note, I just want to say I
It's a good
recognize the great
Yeah.
opportunity that it was for us to listen to you tonight.
Oh,
and,
good.
Thank you so much for coming. and
Yeah,
for
thank
great
you.
work.